that. So we all do seem to be here. So thank you for your attendance, and I welcome you to this Performance Audit and Risk Committee meeting. Do we have any apologies?
I've received no apologies.
There are no apologies. Are there any conflicts of interest? None. I have mentioned those couple of pieces of business to Nadine and to Nick as to questions I might raise through the process. There are no deputations or petitions. None. Then we move to item 4 on the agenda, health and safety, and I invite Matthew Bennett to report.
Good afternoon, Council. Just confirming that you're able to hear me okay.
Very good.
Excellent. Technology is working for us. Good afternoon. I take the health and safety report as read. There's 3 points I would like to highlight for you. Over the past, since the previous health and safety report, realistically, the focus has been almost exclusively on COVID. In going into lockdown, our risk profile shifted dramatically from acute risk potential, that's essentially injuries resulting from our critical risks and field work, traumatic injuries, through to a significantly higher chronic harm profile, with the field work coming to almost a complete standstill. However, having a lot of workers sedentary and working at computers and desks. While I'm confident that we have done a good job of mitigating and reacting to any occurrences of chronic harm, we won't fully know that for probably several more weeks. The very nature of it is it takes time to appear. That said, I'm also confident that when we do get the first indication, we act quickly and rectify it so that it doesn't become having a long-term or even a medium-term impact on the worker. The other part that has been taking up a significant portion of our time has been preparing for first the essential work or essential services under level 4, then the safe services under level 3, and we are now looking ahead at what will be possible or feasible under level 2. We went through, under Bill's leadership and instruction, we went through a work by permission, and so we would review all the requests and activities of what work people thought was reasonable for us to undertake under the restrictions of those various levels, and making sure that we had good methodologies in place. And while it hasn't been a perfect system, I believe that we have done well in setting up and resourcing our staff, right through to now under level 3, where we already have staff out in the field undertaking work, and more coming online over the next few days. This includes flood protection crews, park rangers, and resource management officers undertaking consent monitoring. The final piece that I would like to just point out to you is that we are now getting ready for level 2. While government still only has offered high-level indications of what level 2 will look like, we are cognizant of what that will mean for us and awaiting more detail to come from them, which I expect next week sometime. Generally speaking, it appears that they will still, the main restrictions that will be placed on businesses will be excluding any external from Canterbury travel, in our case external to Canterbury travel, and large gatherings. Currently they're indicating indoor gatherings of 50 people and outdoor gatherings of 100 people. In a building such as Tuam Street or Timaru, we have to interpret that for what is their intent. And I've been working with the assets team, and I anticipate that we'll need to put significantly lower capacities on our meeting rooms in particular. But it's still early days and awaiting greater clarification from government, from central government, as to what they actually will be permitting. So that's it from me for now. I now open it to any questions.
Thank you, Matthew. A couple of questions from me. Just some clarity around the 50 people. So does that mean 50 people in the building, or as you allude to, potentially 50 people in a space, whether it be the cafeteria or a meeting room? Or do you not really understand that point from government at this time?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It is still unclear exactly what they will permit on that 50 people. I am anticipating it will be more, it's about the density of people that, if I was to read the intent. And so I think of, say, some of our larger meeting rooms, the Waimakariri has a capacity of 40 people. I don't think they would be particularly keen on seeing 40 people in a space that size. But if you think about the whole building, I believe we have a capacity at Chewham Street. I think it's rated for 600 people. Again, they wouldn't like to see that full, but I think the intent would be that we can have staff in that space. We could have 50 people in Chewham Street.
Thank you, Matthew. And my second question, we were made aware by the Chief Executive this morning that we've done a wellbeing or wellness survey of staff, which seems to have come back with some pretty positive numbers, but also aware that a number of people have not responded to that survey. So just any thoughts on that? It appears that we're doing reasonably well in our wellness and in contact with staff to this point.
I would have to be honest and say I'm not the most informed person on that space. Under the crisis management team structure, I'm leading the safety branch, and the welfare branch is running that stealth wellbeing welfare survey. I can say that from a health and safety practitioner's point of view, under the leadership of the CE and the executive leadership team, the steps that were taken and endorsed by council around ensuring employment for ECAN staff went a very, very long way towards creating that stability for our people to be looked after. And I suspect that's reflected in those results. I'll also say that I think that it's really important through an event like this is that we monitor and track, because people's well-being will fluctuate through a journey like this. However, speaking from my health and safety seat, I can say that I think that ECAN has done a very good job of taking care of its people as best as it can.
Thank you, Matthew. Any further questions from committee members?
John here.
Claire has one in the
Claire first, and then I think Grant.
Yeah, John, I just had a point of clarity for Matthew. And Matthew, thank you very much for the update on the COVID work that you're doing to get us back into business. Just regarding, and I'm not sure whether you've got it in front of you, page 14 of our agenda papers, and I'm just trying to get some sense of how the numbers relate in the graphics that we've got. The year-to-date summary total has 47 cases by group in total for the period 1st of November to the 29th of February. Our lag indicators talk about incidents of 6 for the month of March. I'm just wondering, have they been added in? And then how does that fit with the incidents by status in by actual harm figures where we've got what looks to be 64? Are we talking of different timeframes there, or what am I missing? Why aren't they marrying up?
I have to be honest, Councillor, and apologise. I'm currently not able to access the report. I'm working off my phone, so I can't give you a detailed answer. I will look into that the next chance I get to see the report, and I will provide clarity and an answer when I'm able.
Thank you, Matthew.
Councillor Edge.
Just a quick comment, really. Thank you very much, Matthew, and the rest of the team, really, at Environment Canterbury, for providing that really high level of kind of working from home risk assessments and caring about the staff and their psychological awareness of what's going on. So it's really pleasing to hear, and I think at the speed that you had to work with and getting everybody feeling comfortable in their home working environment, that's really impressive.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Grant. If there are no further questions, I would suggest that Councillor Edge will move that we receive the Health and Safety Governance Report, and Councillor Mackay will second. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi, John. Hi.
Aye.
We will do this quickly. We move then to item 4.2, risk management. Nick Hill.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. I'll take the risk report as read. The key points that I raised relate specifically, of course, to the COVID disruption that we're facing, and sought to provide some information and assurance around specifically cybersecurity, finance and health and safety risks as to how we have managed those over the period. I'd be looking to seek any issues that you would like additional assurance or otherwise. Likewise, I'd like to note around our upcoming audit program for the following year. This is something that we remain mindful of, and we'll be looking to bring that in the near future. I'd invite any questions.
Well, I guess my first question is, and Matthew's answered a little of that, is how are we looking, given the government's asked a question of us as an organisation, how prepared we will be to move to level 2? What are we doing to facilitate and achieve that? And will we be ready by the 11th of May, which may be an indicative date of a decision being made?
Yeah, thank you. In terms of our readiness, we have gone through the process from the shift into level 4 into level 3, and now as we implement level 3, we're looking towards level 2. I think in general we can say that we have some pretty effective ways of working now that support sort of the ongoing operation. It gives us the opportunity to repeat processes as well, and do so in a way that sort of prioritises the health, safety and well-being of staff and our customers. As far as readiness goes, I'd say that we are ready and in a position to respond to the expected clarity that we hope to be receiving from government around what their sort of expectations are, noting that the decision for level 2 is still coming for the 11th. So if we see something similar to what we got in the transition to level 3, that there may be some additional delay before we shift into that level 2 phase, and that lifting of restrictions isn't a requirement to shift the way that we're operating. It just gives us the ability to change that, and we'd be looking to take I suppose a mature and staged approach to ensure that things are done in as smooth and safe way as possible.
Thank you for that response, Nick. I think it's as I might expected it to be. Whilst I'm keen and some are keen to see us repopulate the building and regain our conversations in person, a staged approach is ultimately the best response that we can do. So thank you for that. I note Graham McGlynn has a comment.
Just to re-emphasise that Nick and myself have had some conversations prior to the COVID matters taking priority about the next year's audit plan and tying it together to the terms of reference, and I would hope that Nick will be coming available over the coming 3 to 4 weeks to progress this a little more once the immediate imperatives that have been most important are under control, and he's happy that he can divert some of his attention into that project.
Yes, indeed. I think things, while they have been incredibly hectic over the previous period, our ability to transition some of those projects into reinitiate them into an active phase is likely.
Just for clarity's sake as well, prior to COVID, Nick had been working on developing a 3-year audit plan. We were going to workshop it with the committee. We've still got it until 1 July. It commenced in 1 July, so we've still got 1 July to actually before it becomes active. So we'll try and get a workshop in to get some feedback from councillors about the content of the 3-year program, and then we'll put it to the Power Committee for adoption.
Thank you, Miles. Are there any further questions of councillors? If not, then I might suggest that Graham McGlynn would move that we receive this report, and that Councillor Mackenzie second it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. We now move to item number 5, the action list. Nick Hill.
I'll just work through our technology. There we go. On the action list, at this stage, we have one item around sensitive expenditure. I'd like to note that we previously looked to include audit letter actions quarterly in a specific report, which we did previously. But based on a query, we look to include audit letter actions, including the management letter around PT balance in this action list.
Do we have any questions of Nick?
If I could just jump in and just a refreshment of why the sensitive expenditure report's there. Just trying to get it so that we don't necessarily have to consider it in the public excluded. We've got listed providers which make it difficult to put it in the public part of the meeting, given contractual arrangements we may or may not have with each of them. So we're working on a way of making sure that we can disclose the sensitive expenditure without breaking any confidences.
Thank you, Miles. Could I have someone please move that we receive the action list report?
I'll do that.
Thank you. And someone, thank you, Ian. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried.
Aye.
We then move to item 5.2, the 8+4 forecast report, and I invite Catherine Harbrow to the microphone.
Great, thank you, Councillor. This report is probably very ancient now, and but at a point in time, this was the forecast that we had expected the year-end result to appear. We did try at the time to think about what the COVID impacts might be. We're still investigating further impacts. And we also gave a bit of a cash flow forecast there to show you that there's sufficient cash flow at that point in time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of the team?
Jenny has one.
Thank you. Yes, Jenny.
Hold on, I've just got to
Oh, I've got my mic on. I'm just getting a bit, I'm trying to look at the report. So, Catherine, who's done this report? Catherine, it was you. So we're on 5.2, the 8x4. I just wanted to ask a question of clarification, really. Where we have surplus like that, I know it's old, but how do we actually, as elected members, how do we actually track what happens to that? And you know, I know we might probably do it through the portfolio groups, but what is the easiest way for an elected member to actually follow that?
So we have, following on the agenda, we have the financial results by portfolio and the commentary that's showing you the year-to-date variances. So we update that each month. And basically any underspends or surpluses at the end of the year go into topping up our reserves. So if the expenditure is normally funded through a general reserve, then the general reserve will benefit from that underspend. And that's why it's important to understand at an 8+4 time just which reserves are going to be topped up, and that's why we've got a reserve table there showing you what we expect the year-end reserve balances to be.
It's on page 25, Jenny.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I do get that all. I was just making being clear. So people in then following on from that, if during the year, so it is possible to actually top up expenditure. Like I put a comment in there, like at the moment around the community, you know, the school and community education work that we do. So it is possible in the portfolio groups to ask for those to be topped up and put it to council.
Yes, so as part of the financial health report, we do a table which demonstrates the council approval to overspend. So those are projects or events that have occurred where we haven't rated or we haven't included in the annual plans or the long-term plan, and so therefore it's an opportunity to table a report with the council to ask for that additional spend, and we're keeping a track of those approvals. So the delegation policy doesn't allow us to spend money above our annual plan or long-term plan, so it's basically providing delegation for those overspends.
Okay, yes. So the place to raise those then, is it best in the portfolio group or is it best in here? How's that connection work?
If I could jump in, Jenny, both. It's probably a good idea to get the portfolio councillors on board. Have a briefing as to what's intended, and then depending on the amount. And if it's outside the delegations of staff and outside of the budget provision for the activity, then bring it through to the park committee as a formal paper for consideration and approval or recommendation to council, depending on the size of it.
Oh, well, that's really good. Thanks for clearing that up for me, Miles. I thought that's what happened, but I just thought I'd ask the question so I'm clear. Thank you very much. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Jenny. Councillor Mackay.
One thing that Miles or Catherine might just like to mention to help Jenny's understanding too is if it's an underspend on a project that needs to be done, then it's identified and rolled over as well. So that is easily tracked. But so that's another question or another point. My point just really relates to some clarity, and I just wonder whether we need to note it in the minutes. It's around point 10 where we talk about the 250,000 from general reserves for the Rangatata work that we approved. The wording could be misread in that it says to fund recovery and future planning work proposed. When most people think of future planning work, they think of an RMA process. And my understanding is that this was future work around the review of the river plan and the river rating district and a bigger look at what we might do there. I am correct in that understanding, am I, Miles?
Yes, you are, Claire. It's sorry for the wording. It is for the catchment plan, the $100,000 we've got in each year for the 10 years for each of the catchment plans, and that was bringing that one forward.
Yeah, I just wonder whether we could actually note that, because otherwise people might think, oh, well, we're doing some extra planning as in an RMA process.
Yep, I'm sure Vivo can note that, and I can help her with the right wording.
Yep, thank you.
Oh, and also the other point you made is worth just clarifying as well for Jenny, and that is that if a project has been interrupted or can't have been completed for the year, staff are generally asked to bring forward what's called carryovers into the following year. So the PAR committee goes through a process of approving carryovers. So it's like tagging. Rather than the unspent money falling into a reserve, it's like tagging it and taking it into the next year to ensure that it's got the approval to be funded to complete the project in the following year. A bit of that occurs because obviously our work is very difficult. We don't stop doing stuff at the end of June, and we need to have a carryover process to allow unfinished projects to be funded in the following financial year.
I agree with that carryover process. It's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Graham, comment.
One of the risks associated with the carryover project, which management will no doubt be all over, is the percentage of completion of the project versus the remaining budget, to give us an idea whether what we have done is on budget or whether there's any need for further expenditure, or whether we need to allow further income. So allocation of income towards finishing a project. So that'll be one of the key things that the audit will be looking at, I would imagine, in these circumstances.
Thank you, Graham. Catherine, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the deliberations paper that we're pulling together for later next week has got the list of carryovers that we are proposing at this stage. And normally we don't have a lot of carryovers because it would only carry over where there's a third party contractual arrangement. And but this year we will have a lot more. So we have compiling a list of those, and you'll be able to see those on the papers next Friday.
Thank you, Catherine. I note here on the recommendation from this report is that we note the 21-28 plus 4 and anticipated effect on year-end results. Should we add to that it is prior to COVID, or do we just leave that statement as it sits?
It wouldn't hurt to add noting this is a pre-COVID state.
Thank you. If the Secretary could take note of that, then I will then move that motion. Could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to do that, John.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against, carried. We move then to item 5.3, the public transport financial update, and invite Stuart Gibbon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you. And I suspect your report will be similar to the previous one, given COVID.
Yes. Look, I'll take the report as read. Actually, it's COVID that I really wanted to focus on in our conversation this afternoon.
Thank you.
As you know, we've been through quite a few transitions since we last spoke as a PAR on PT, transitioning into level 4 at the end of March, and then more recently out of level 4 into level 3. And following on the comments from Nick, we are currently investing an increasing amount of time in understanding, or trying to understand at least, the government's views and guidance on what level 2 should look like and how we can apply that in a public transport space. I'd like to acknowledge the enormous effort of our operators to maintain our service through what's been a very challenging time for them, with driver challenges and health and safety challenges, and just the general psychology of this event on their people. To maintain their public transport operation is a really amazing task. At the moment, public transport is running under level 3. Government have provided sufficient funding to offset fare losses through till the end of June this fiscal year. And we are engaged in conversations with them on a national basis to understand what the world looks like post 30 June, because it's a material issue for us going forward. With level 2, there is an expectation that where we are able to do so, we reintroduce the collection of fares, but that needs to be done in a safe manner and a practical manner, aligning to the rules and guidelines that government set for level 2. So that poses a number of challenges for us. Not least of which for level 2 is a capacity challenge. So at the moment in level 3, physical distancing of 2 metres is required on public transport. And what that means is we can carry no more than between 8 or 11 people on a bus before it is deemed to be full. Now, with our current patronage sitting at around 6,500 people a day, on the face of it, that seems quite achievable. However, in our peak times, particularly with schools and the mix now,
you've disappeared there, Stuart. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me now, Stuart? You've disappeared.
Oops, he's coming and going.
Coming and going.
Oh, he can hear us.
So you can hear me. We can't hear you, Stuart, at this point.
How about now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Capacity is going to be a big challenge for us with the limitations being applied to public transport. So in level 2, there's a 1 metre restriction, which means we can only carry 20% of a full load of a bus at peak times, which is going to have a material impact on the transport system, but also on our revenue gathering capabilities. So a lot of work to do to figure out what level 2 looks like for PT in terms of capacity, in terms of fares, in terms of health and safety for drivers. And it's important for government and ourselves to recognise the interconnectedness of these issues. If the expectation is people come back to work under level 2, but we can't carry all these people on public transport, then the roading system will be overloaded with traffic and congestion, which is not what the government's looking for. So a lot of conversations are going on at the moment about supporting people to continue to work from home, using staggered start times to offset the peaks, rather than trying to tell people not to use PT and drive their car, which is not a message that any council or government really wants to propagate. So lots of challenges ahead for us. Questions?
Thank you, Stuart. That was the first thing that popped into my mind. If we're trying to get people back on the buses and promote public transport, the worst thing that we can do is then not have a seat for them. So I'm pleased that those conversations being had and hopefully some pragmatic resolution comes from it, because it really does defeat the whole purpose of what we're trying to achieve. Questions from fellow councillors?
Yeah, I think I'm first in line there, yes. John. I see for the public transport meeting we've got later on this afternoon, Stuart, that a survey has shown that a high proportion of people aren't using public transport, regardless, despite the fact it's available, because they're worried about catching COVID from surfaces. My perception of that is that that's unlikely to change under level 2, because until we get a vaccine, people will see that it's the risk of catching the disease hasn't actually gone away unless New Zealand's declared COVID-free, which would seem to be unlikely at this stage. I guess my question is given that the market isn't, is recognising that it doesn't want to use public transport, are we worrying about being overcrowded on the buses too much? And B, is there something we could do to allay the public's fears about getting onto public transport?
It's a good question, Ian. In the case of Auckland and Wellington, they're already experiencing capacity challenges. Obviously they have slightly higher demand than Canterbury, but even so, under the current conditions in level 3, they are finding vehicles at their capacity already. And they are running their weekday timetables now. So their ability to respond to that under level 2 is significantly compromised. We will be moving to our weekday timetables in 2 weeks' time in preparation for level 2. And I think it's fair to say that under level 2, the psychology will change. More people will want to engage with PT. We won't be returning to the same level of engagement, but being able to only carry 8 people on a bus means it will rapidly fill up on its journey, and we will end up leaving people behind. I think we're all expecting that to happen across the country. One of the key issues here is the Ministry of Health primarily calling the shots with this event, and they have a fundamental issue with public transport, that is it is an uncontrolled environment, and that is that it is not easy to contact trace who is on a bus at any given time, whereas in a workplace you can contact trace because you know who is in the workplace. So that's one of the key challenges here.
Thank you for that, Stuart.
If I could just
challenging.
If I could just make a follow-up comment, really, and that is that regardless of what the government says, people will make their own judgment on these things. And we've seen that with schools going back, where only a handful of kids have actually gone back to school, despite the government saying, kids should go back to school and there's no danger to them. So I make that comment when it comes to the freeing up of things. It seems to me, though, that going forward, what you're saying, Stuart, is there's going to be some significant budgetary challenges for running PT if we only can handle 20% of the passengers, and yet we'll be running effectively a full service, and the government stops funding us after June. So that's a real concern.
Yes, so government is certainly aware of these challenges. In particular, public transport is funded from NZTA through the National Land Transport Fund. And because that fund is a hypothecated fund in that it receives its money from transport activities such as fuel excise and road user charges, and those two sources of revenue are significantly depressed at the moment and will continue to be so. NZTA are forecasting that they will struggle to be able to fund underwriting PT on their own going forward, and they will be reliant on central government to help them in this situation. And so that is why there is some uncertainty at the moment as to what happens after the 30th of June. Having said that, everyone has made it quite clear to government that it would be ironic and unacceptable for government to save the industry through level 4 and level 3, only to see it collapse under level 2.
Thank you, Stuart.
I enjoyed the irony. Yeah.
And Chair Yui, you have a question.
So Stuart, that was my question. So given they, upheld it during level 3 and 4, which you have just said, I'm just wondering if there's been any consideration from the public health perspective in marrying that with, it's mainly people. We don't want all these people coming to work in their cars. Is there any indication that people are looking at technology for a solution to this that could be instigated, really expeditiously, where the technology that can tell people how full the buses are very quickly? I mean, it seems to me that can be got up and running very quickly, like it can for contract tracing. So are there any conversations like that going on?
In terms of contact tracing, yep, there's conversations on that topic going on at the moment. The challenge with contact tracing is currently it is opt-in, so it is not mandatory or compulsory. And even if government produces an app, it will be challenging for them to make it compulsory as well. There will need to be law changes to enable that, and whether the community and the country would comply with compulsory tracking, that's a big question. Whereas in a workplace, you can make it compulsory because if people don't want to comply, well, you just don't let them in. We can't really do that easily on a bus and run a public transport service efficiently. In terms of counting people on vehicles, again, there is technology around to do that. We certainly don't have the budget to enable us to implement that, nor the time really. It would take some time to stand up a project like that and implement it. So at the moment, what we're trying to think about is how could we answer the government's or Ministry of Health's contact tracing question through the use of our Metro card to enable us to carry more people.
You there, John?
I'm here.
I am here now with my microphone on. I will start again. I'm trying to look at 3 different screens and bring things up. So Stuart, really appreciate the work that you and your team are doing, and I understand Edward came up with a cunning plan to give a chocolate bar to staff and the like. It is a challenging job that you are trying to do, and you seem to have, if not all the answers, the questions that need to be asked along the way. So we, as a committee, and I think as a council, Chair Yui would agree, really appreciate the work that you are doing to bring us through this. Nadine, a question there. Nadine?
Thanks, Chair. I really just wanted to reiterate all the points that have been discussed. I think if I can provide some assurance with what you've heard from Stuart, he is pretty much in the team in constant contact with all the other public transport providers in the country, and he and I have discussed exactly these challenges, where if there are going to be some solutions that can help government find a way through, then the likelihood is that they'll come out of Auckland and Wellington. So we're working very hard on all the questions that the councillors have raised today.
Thank you for that, Nadine. In the need to continue with time, I would then ask that someone please move that we receive the financial update on public transport with the caveat that it is again prior to COVID-19. So if someone that can move that, please.
I'll do that, John. It's Jenny here.
Thank you, Chair. And seconded.
Yeah, I'm happy to, John.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes. Aye. Carried. Thank you. We move then to item 5.4, Portfolio Finance Report. Tasha and or Catherine.
Hi, it's Tasha here. So for the portfolio financial report, this is at the end of March. We have a surplus showing of 7.3 million against a budgeted deficit of 0.86. So overall variance of 8.16 million. And that's across the majority of the portfolios. Is there any specific questions in relation to this report?
I don't specifically have one, but I'm pleased to see that balance is moving forward to help us with our annual plan and work going forward. Questions from any other councillors?
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, John, so it's comfortable with it.
Thank you then. Could have someone please move that we receive the portfolio finance report to 31st March.
I'll move that, John.
So.
Thank you, Grant, and seconded.
Graham.
Graham. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Aye. Carried. We move then to item 5.6, financial health reports. Again, Tasha.
Okay, so again, this is at the end of March. So the key thing here again is that we've got a really strong cash position. Our balance today is 32.8 million, so down from what was in this report, but that just reflects that we're now at the end of the month. Are there any other questions in regards to the financial health report?
Do councillors have any questions? If not, then I will move that the committee receive the monthly financial health report, receive the Bancorp quarterly treasury report, and notes the table of council approved under budgeted expenditure. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, John. It's Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Carried. We now move to public excluded. I haven't missed anything, have I, Madam Secretary?
No, all good, and I'll just turn off the recording.
Thank you very much. I will now move that we